is Jason J. Rock Houston, and you're listening to Chaotic Riffs Magazine. We can be found on the web at www.chaoticriffs.com, and our special guest tonight is guitarist Lou Dibello, and I believe this is the third time I'll be interviewing Lou, so welcome back to the show. How you doing tonight, Lou?
Real good, man. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Yeah, now, I know you're from Illinois, and I know, especially in Chicago, there's always been like a real big blues, kind of a blues scene. Were you ever much into the blues?
I actually have played a lot of blues, and although I haven't played, really in Chicago per se a lot. I'm down here a couple hours south, but there's a really big blues scene down here, and as it happens, there's one pretty bluesy tune on the new album, Love Is Blind.
Okay.
Kind of a Gary Moore kind of feel or something. Yeah. But yeah, years ago, I used to play in a house band. It was a Chicago style, blues band. I played in the house band down here, and so I've done a lot of blues.
Oh, that's cool. I just get a little people background on that, and part of the reason I was asking is I was reading in your bio that of course you're a pretty well-known rock guitarist, but that when you're first starting out, you started out both on the saxophone and the piano. So did you start out first as a piano player or a sax player?
Well, that was just when I was a kid, so I had piano lessons for, almost maybe 3 years, and then I played saxophone for about a year, before I sort of picked up the guitar, and so I had that little bit more of a musical background that way, I suppose.
And that have to come in handy, I would think, even like when you're working in the studio and recording, because a lot of people may be surprised to, learn guys like, Jakey Lee and Eddie Van Halen, they start out on the piano and then kind of transfer to guitar. And I've often been told by guys that the fact that you can also play the piano, it helps when writing music. Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, and if let's say for a kid, when a kid learns piano and learns the basics and can kind of play some basic things on the piano, then they've learned a lot about music in general, and it really doesn't matter what instrument you're playing. Whether it's the rhythm or the key or the notes in the scale or whatever, and then sometimes, and especially for kids, I think, then sometimes some of that stuff transfers a little more easily to the guitar, whereas maybe a guy that doesn't have any background at all and is only looking at guitar tablature or even I've had some adult students that play pretty well, and they can figure out stuff by ear if they sit there and listen to it for a long time, and they can get it a lot of times pretty close, but they have absolutely they don't know the name of the note, they nobody could say it's a G chord, so all of that stuff, the more you have in your arsenal there, I think the
better equipped you are. Yeah, because you're talking to a guy that's not a musician, but I'm a huge music fan, and it amazes me to find things out like you take a guy like Eddie Van Halen, okay, and look at what that guy can do on the guitar. Yet, but people may be amazed to learn the guy can't read a lick of music, but look what he's able to do on that guitar.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and then there are guys that they play like, take a guy like Tony McAlpine, and he's very gifted and talented at what he does, but just plays so musically precise, and he can shred with the best of them.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of different, a lot of different ways that people, sort of get there.
Yeah.
It's interesting, the background of different guitar players and artists like that, where, maybe they, have some other instrument, or then, of course, you have a blues player like Stevie Ray Vaughan that, had a, really kind of organic, informal, kind of development. So,
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting too. Like you say, you take any number of these guitar players, and they all have kind of a different approach. I mean, I think I talked to you about this last time I interviewed you. You take a guy like Steve Vai. I mean, I remember when I first I first saw Steve playing. Was on a David Lee Roth album back in 1986, Eat 'Em and Smile. First time I heard that song, Yankee Rose. I mean, his guitar was literally talking, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. He was great, and I actually saw him when he was playing backup guitar for Frank Zappa.
Wow.
In about 1981 or so.
Oh yeah.
It was like he was pretty much fresh out of Berkeley, and was on tour with Frank Zappa, and of course we didn't know who he was, and then maybe another 2 years later or so, I heard his Flexible album, whenever that came out, and then of course I go, it's like he was kind of like taking the Van Halen thing, to the ultimate degree,
Yeah, I mean, Flexible, and then his next album, Passion and Warfare. I mean, anything Steve Vai has really done. I think what's amazing about it is he's one of these guys that if you listen to anything he's done, no two tunes sound exactly alike. They're very unique. It's all about how many sounds can he get in the songs. And the thing about it is, especially not just listening to an album, but when you're going to see go see an instrumental artist perform live, you got to be able to keep the audience's attention. You can't just have 10 great shredding tunes, that sound like an angry bee. You got to be able to keep the people's attention, especially in a live auditorium. And the fact that look at what that guy can do. Look at what a guy like Satriani can do. So those are the players to me that really got something special.
Well, yeah, and there's something to be said, for the the use of dynamics and other things that, of course, those guys do really well, and any really good player does, of course. But yeah, that's what it's all about for sure.
And now at the top interview, we were mentioning the fact that you're from Illinois, which has always been there's always been a great huge blues scene there. So with that being said, I was kind of interested in finding out from you, Lou, kind of what was your introduction to rock music and these rock guitar guys like we're talking about.
Well, here downstate Illinois, this is where REO Speedwagon came from, and then bands like Head East and other bands like that were pretty popular on a national scale in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
So so there was a time where there was a legitimate rock and roll, hard rock scene in this area, and and that continued pretty well through the 80s, which in the early 80s is when I first started to playing in some clubs and so forth as I was still a teenager and stuff then.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting you bring up those two bands, because REO Speedwagon, I think anybody listening to this, there's pretty fair chance people have heard of REO Speedwagon, and the other band, Head West. Well, Head East. I'm sorry. I have heard of a band. I mean, but again, like a lot of people, I can't really name any tunes, but I've heard of a band. I've actually I've actually listened to some of the tunes, and my point being, they're one of those bands that have been around for years. I'd say kind of legendary, but yet at the same time, they really haven't gotten their dues, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah. And Cheap Trick is from Rockford, which is about 2.5 hours from here. They used to play, here in the area, in their early years. So anyways, when I was just starting to get in some, halfway professional or semi-pro bands that were playing, clubs and whatnot. I was 17 or 18, and I got hooked up with some guys that were, 23, 24, 25, a little bit more experienced than me.
Yeah.
And so there was, kind of a legitimate sort of rock scene for sure at that point. And, so I sort of came about it, pretty naturally, I suppose. And then, there's always been a lot of music in this area, although now, and more recently, there's not really a lot of original hard rock bands or rock bands. There's a lot of country, and there's a lot of more sort of eclectic stuff and different, kind of things. But there's definitely not what I would call, any kind of a hard rock scene or anything like that.
And then that makes room for for a guy like you to come in and kind of do your thing. Now it's funny you mentioned Cheap Trick, one of my all-time favorite bands, and what I've always loved about Cheap Trick is they're kind of the anti-establishment in the sense that if somebody tried to like put this band together on a piece of paper, you'd never think the band would be successful.
Right.
Right. You got the two kind of cool-looking guys and the two kind of as they self-proclaim, say we're kind of oddball guys or whatever.
Right.
But Rick Nielsen, to me, like he's a great guitar player in his own right. But again, people, because of the way he looks or whatever, he doesn't necessarily get on the cover of Guitar World magazine or anything like that. But and I love the fact that Cheap Trick also, besides the image and all that, they're one of those bands that you can not really pigeonhole. I mean, people might put on like their first couple albums. Okay, they're a hard rock band, and then you hear something like from their 1986 album, The Flame. A great power ballad. But it's like they can do kind of anything. Is my point.
Yeah, real good songwriters, and that's really their thing. I mean, they're like a good rock and roll band, but there's a little bit more on the song, a little bit more in the songwriting department, than not that there's anything
wrong with that.
wrong with it, but you could say that like AC/DC songs are a little bit more of a certain formula, whereas Trick tunes, have more variety,
Although I tell you, if you go back and you put on some of those early albums, like, the first two or three, ton of like hard rock stuff. I mean, my all-time favorite is the album like Heaven Tonight, and of course you can't go wrong with the Dream Police. And then
Color and Black and White, Yeah, all that stuff is great.
In fact, Cheap Trick's another interesting band in the sense that probably the album that band is most known for is Live at Budokan, which is not even a studio album, and the song that really knocked them out of a park for them was that song I Want You to Want Me. Oddly enough, many people don't know. If you go back and you listen to the original studio version of that, it sounds nothing like the live version. It sounds like almost a honky tonk country song. But what they were able to do with that song, on the live album, it just took it to another world.
No, you're right. That's exactly right.
And now let's talk about your latest album. I believe it's called American Hard Rock. It just came out last Friday. And another thing I want to talk about that I really love the fact that you chose to cover Edgar Winter's Frankenstein. That's one of those last kind of lost classic rock tunes. Great tunes. People heard it and probably 1,000 times on the radio. And another great Edgar Winter tune I always loved was Free Ride. Those were two of his best tunes. But Edgar Winter, he's one of those artists that he's still alive, he's still kicking, he's still out there touring and making new music. Good for him. But he's kind of fallen off the radar at the same time. A lot of people have kind of forgotten about him. I think it's a real shame.
Yeah, that stuff, on that album, what is it? May Only Come Out at Night, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that was the pinnacle. And it amazed me to learn years later that the guy playing guitar on that is Ronnie Montrose, from the band Montrose.
Well, and Rick Derringer too,
Yeah.
Both those guys,
together,
played with Edgar Winter, and Rick Derringer produced it, I think,
Yeah,
it's crazy.
So I mean, again, it's a great tune, and I'm sure that's why you covered. But talk a little bit about your kind of your attachment to the song and why you thought it needed to be covered.
Well, I've been doing that tune live for a long time.
Wow.
And sometimes I've done it with backing tracks. And and then I do it live with my band. And it's just it's a lot of fun to play. I've got a lot of the keyboard parts worked out, that I do for that I do with the guitar, of course.
Oh, wow, that's
so yeah. So it's it's pretty cool, pretty unique.
So wow, that's cool because some guys do that. They play the keyboard through a guitar. That's kind of interesting. Now another track.
Well, I mean, it's the keyboard parts. I have them worked out. I do them different ways on the guitar, and then with the recording on the album, I recorded a lot. Of course I overdubbed some of the extra guitar parts that I wouldn't play when I do it live. So,
that's the thing I noticed.
Came out real nice.
That's the thing I noticed with your version is, on one hand it sounds pretty true to the original, but I think your version, if it's even possible, that you rocked it up even more a little.
I was real happy with the way the recorded version came out for sure. Yeah.
And another tune I love was the song "Flying High," a great instrumental track. I mean, I listened to that, and it just sounded like like it made me think of all those great '80s guitar gods.
Yeah, I thought it. In some ways, I thought it had a little bit of a kind of a Van Halen sound.
Exactly. Like almost
that was
like
just one that I kind of had. That I had worked with for a while, and then when I started recording the album, I sort of put the whole arrangement together.
Now a lot of times when you do an instrumental tracks like that, do you kind of just kind of jamming, and this is kind of what comes out, or do you have specific like song idea in mind?
Well, like with that one, I would get sort of the main riff going, and then figure out a structure that works for the song. So it starts out with a riff, but then I've got to be able to turn it into a song. So there's got to have something that is the chorus or the verse. And so a lot of times it starts out just kind of with the riff, but then I'll figure out how I want to structure it for the song.
Now I know on the last two albums, you've kind of you've added a little more vocal tracks, which I think is a cool idea because as much as I enjoy instrumental music, I also like love songs, songs that have lyrics and stuff, because it's easier to kind of interpret what the song is about and all that. So talk a little bit about your decision, kind of feature more vocal tracks, because again, I think it's a great great progression in what you're doing.
A lot of that comes from the fact that since I do so many live gigs and
it's easier to kind of
there's covers that I would do for a full
show,
3-set show, and then if I'm doing some instrumental originals, of course I throw a few of those in, but in terms of really kind of putting out a product or whatever, and putting out something that more people are likely to listen to.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not really that unusual for me. I mean, I had recorded mostly instrumental stuff before Heatwave, and then when I did Heatwave, I did a little bit more vocal tunes. But so for me, it's a lot more of just kind of a natural progression, as an artist or whatever, a composer, sort of doing my thing. To me, it seems like just sort of just kind of a natural progression.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a cool progression because even like you said, I think it makes it a little more interesting listening to the album. As great as an album of all instrumental tunes might be to some people, like it's kind of given us the two sides of Lou Dibello. Okay, this is what he can do vocally, this is what he can do on the guitar. And on that note, since you've been like primarily guitarist all these years, how are you feeling with your ability as a singer? I realize you have another guy on one of the other tracks singing, but I think it's cool that you're kind of doing both these days. And like you said, when you go and do a live show, it makes it that much easier kind of...
I mean... one of my main, influences early on was Frank Marino, and of course, Frank Marino or Jimi Hendrix or Ted Nugent or Pat Travers. None of those guys are like, great, amazing singers, but they also, do their songs, perfectly fine. Nobody even thinks twice about it,
Yeah.
So, so I kind of took a little bit of my cue from guys like that, and even like John Sykes, with Blue Murder or something, his solo stuff.
Yeah.
And so, in that regard, it seems to work pretty well, and at different points over the years, I've sung lead, here or there, and of course I've always sung a lot of backups or whatever, but it's coming together pretty well, and again, like I play a lot of shows, so I've had the chance to really sort of really kind of work it out, and but yeah, it's all, it's still a work in progress, but it's I think it's going pretty well.
I mean, I think it's a cool progression, like you said. I mean, just on the air, as far as like listening to an album. Okay, we get a couple vocal tracks. It's some great sounding guitar, and then when people come see you live, it's like, okay, we get a little bit of everything here, and I think that way, like I was saying earlier, when you have an artist like that, it's much easier to kind of keep the people's attention live, because they're getting a little bit of everything, and I'm sure, like you said, you even got other guys up on the stage with you, so that makes for a much better live show than if it was just one guy up there shredding, all night.
Yeah, right. Yeah, with the Lou Dibello band, it's just a 3-piece, but both the drummer and the bass player sing real well, so we have a lot of harmonies, and fills out the sound that way. And then, when I do my solo act, that's actually kind of a pretty versatile thing that I've kind of fell into doing more than anything. And, I have like some tracks or some sequencing behind me, so it really comes off more like a band. And I, sometimes I'll do actually a lot of blues, if I'm playing something more low key. So yeah, it's, I'm fortunate that I can sort of scrape together so many gigs, but being versatile, sort of makes that happen a little more easily.
And a lot of times when you have less people in a band like that, it makes for a better sound. I mean, people may fail to realize, like, you take a great band like The Who. I mean, I often thought myself, hey, there's 4 guys in the band, but I told that's really just kind of a trio, like a 3-piece band with a lead singer. And you take other bands like Grand Funk or even the Jimi Hendrix Experience. All these bands only had 3 guys in them,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And for a long time, the cover band I had, and we did a little bit of original stuff, but it was mostly a cover band, was a 3-piece, and then we added a keyboard player for a while. A 3-piece with a vocalist, and we added a keyboard player for a while. But then, this is just the trio, and both the guys that I have playing with me are real good, so musically we're able to kind of play off each other a little bit, and so yeah, it's a nice situation.
And Ted Nugent's another guy, like I've always kind of followed too, like you, and he's also got a great singer like Derek St. Holmes. But what I've loved is I've heard him over the years like say, Derek St. Jones, he's a singer, but if you look at most of what they do, Ted sings a lot of the stuff, and he's like, he says reason for that is this is a Ted Nugent show, not the Derek St. Holmes show.
Well, yeah, and especially a lot of times now he just goes out as a 3-piece.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes I think he still does some gigs with Derek too.
Yeah, but, every once in a great while.
As a 3-piece a couple times like that.
Yeah, every once in a great while. But you're right. More and more he's going out as a 3-piece, because kind of like what we're talking is, if you've got great players in your band, all you really need is like a great guitar player, a great bass player, and a great drummer, and then, like you said, if everybody's able to do their part, you just kind of play off of each other.
Yep, a lot of good trios, that's for sure.
Yeah. And now, I was also reading, like you said, that you were really influenced early on by Jimi Hendrix. And one thing about Jimi, like you said, is he's known mostly for his guitar playing, but he had one of those, he was able to sing his own material because while people may not consider him, the world's greatest singer out there, he had the kind of voice that he could sing his material. And when you hear Jimi Hendrix singing, it's almost like a guy singing from the heart, because those are his tunes, like you said. He wrote those tunes. And on top of all that, I mean, I never seen Jimmy live because he's a little before my time, but I've seen tons of videos like everybody else, and I mean, what that guy did live, like playing the guitar strings with his teeth and stuff, just amazing,
Yeah. Well, he was sort of the original, the original rock showman, that's for sure, And the way that, the way that his songs, the way that he wrote the tunes, the way they were arranged, and the vocal parts, of course, a lot of his background was in blues and rhythm and blues, and so even his songs that were more of a rock feel, they had a little bit of that quality to it, and again, Frank Marino's another guy like that, and Pat Travers, where it's like the way the tunes are written, it's a little bit different than you would write them if there was a vocalist. But that's what kind of makes it interesting, trying to figure out a way to get the message across,
Yeah, and I was also reading your bio, Lou, that you were one of the first people to really like teach guitar online, and as far as having like streaming video on your site and that, I mean, and when you see what the state of internet has become and all that, what do you think about that?
Well, of course, it's just everything's accelerated at a rapid pace, and I really did have one of the very first websites that had sort of streaming video and like a multimedia, like kind of a flash content or things like that. But even basically by the time I had my idea up and running, the technology had already outpaced me.
Exactly.
So just from a technological standpoint, my stuff was outpaced pretty quickly, but it's not surprising to me, the way things, have gone in terms of, YouTube and video content that's available.
Yeah,
but,
I mean,
at that time, it was really one of the
premier
first
sites.
Places that you could get that type of stuff, that was more than just static pages, that would just be text and show you something. This actually had, video and I did some stuff with Flash at the time and everything, but it's certainly gone miles beyond that now. I
mean, it's kind of amazing to see all the different like streaming services. Look what they're doing with Netflix, streaming movies and streaming music. I mean, I'm an old school guy. I think I told you before, where I kind of miss the days where you could go down to the local record store and check out all the new releases. I mean, these days, if I want to get a physical CD, pretty much what I have to do is either buy them off of bands' websites or go to Amazon.com, and they pretty much got everything there, but you got to wait and get it in the mail, if you know what I mean. But I mean, these kids to me these days are kind of missing it. I mean, it's kind of sad because I live in the Los Angeles area, and if I want to go, to the closest record store is like an hour away in Hollywood. I mean, I got to drive down there. So that's why pretty much I get my stuff off of Amazon. It's just more convenient. But I used to love to look at the artwork, and they would put the lyrics in the book, and you'd have all kinds of great photos and stuff. I mean, like I remember first time I saw like Kiss Alive. You open that up, you got that double gatefold. I mean, they don't do stuff like that anymore.
No, it's definitely everything about it, whether it's the physical product or the lack thereof, or the way a lot of the music is produced. I mean, everything about it is just completely different.
Yeah, that's why I do my best to support guys like you, because I respect the fact that you guys like you continue to put out new music. I've interviewed several bands over the years, and they tell me, well, we've decided we're not going to even bother write or record any new music. We're just going to live off our catalog of music. And certain bands are able, able to do that. But the fact that there are bands doing like what you do, Lou, and continue to write and record new music, that's why I tip my hat to guys like you.
Well, I appreciate it, and I always hope, one of these days, maybe it'll get me a notch or two further up on the ladder. But in the meantime, you just gotta do what you can and see what throw it out there and see what sticks.
Yeah, and what's been your experience like? Do you see like when people come to your shows, they tend to buy more CDs and stuff because it's there, or do you get a lot of orders?
Definitely in the last year or so, and of course that's in a lot of the time that the heat wave has been out, and I've had some shirts and things like that. I've definitely sold more merchandise than probably that I had previously at any time. Although there was a lot of time where I wasn't really selling any, but. And that's nice, and I sell some CDs on CD Baby, and I'll take some direct orders off of the Facebook pages and stuff like that, for the physical CDs, and then it's all available digitally as well. But I've always got them on hand, and I always keep some shirts on hand at shows, and I just about always sell at least some, one CD or a shirt or something, so, and sometimes, several, so that's at least a little bit encouraging.
One good thing about that, I guess, is when you're out touring, you never have any shortage of CD product to sell. But
right.
Do you find, because a lot of people these days have that need to get it right now, and I'm not gonna even buy the whole album. I'm just gonna buy the latest single, or I'm gonna buy one song for 99 cents and see if I like it. Do you think that do you feel, is that kind of how your stuff is being purchased more these days digitally? Do you feel?
I'd have to go and really review some of the numbers and see. I think if you include what I sell at the shows, then I'm for sure selling more complete CDs than whole CD downloads. I'm selling more physical CDs.
That's kind of interesting and promising at the same time.
I'd have to kind of go and maybe see what the single song downloads look like a little more closely. But it's not like I'm selling a ton of those, but and especially maybe like when this interview posts, or some of when the press release posts and some of that stuff gets out there, it'll kind of,
and then people go to the site and check out your stuff. That's kind of interesting, but kind of promising and hopeful at the same time. Now, another reason I think over the last couple of years you kind of gained a little bit more exposure, like we talked about last time, is just think about this for a minute, Lou. You got one of the greatest publicists out there, Chip from Chipster PR, and he helped me get a lot of great interviews over years, and I just want to put it out there to people who don't know. You got this same publicist, this Michael Schenker, the Dead Daisies, Judas Priest. So that's
fortunate that that he puts up with me.
Oh no, but see, that's the thing about this guy Chip. He works with just anybody that he's got on his roster. They've got some kind of talent, because he doesn't just waste his time with anybody.
I appreciate him taking the time, to work with me, of course, and from working together on Heatwave, I really learned a lot about the different sort of avenues for promotion and things like that, and I'm kind of trying to work it, any way I can.
And speaking of that, I was also reading a little press release he sent me. It said something to the fact, because the last album just came out about 2 years ago, and I was reading somewhere in the press release it was saying something to the effect that you were so much aware of a deadline you had to get this album recorded, and finished and put together, and you're like, I did almost like 1 week to the deadline. That's dedication.
Yeah, well, that actually came together pretty nicely, and if I could do if I could do that good on every project, it'd be great.
Yeah. And now the fact that 2 years between albums, that's not a long time, but I love the fact that we've already got some new music from you, Lou. So was it necessarily that you wanted to get some new music out there, or people kind of say, hey, we want some new music, or a little bit of both?
Well, I mean, the response that I got, in terms of reviews and guys like you and other avenues there on Heatwave was really good, and I definitely got the impression that people would be interested in hearing some more stuff whenever I had it ready.
Well, I'm glad you had that feeling, because that's the case, and I think when I heard your Heatwave album, my first thought was something to this effect. Because again, I read the bio they sent me on you, and it said, like you were telling me earlier, but you've been playing all these years in various different bands, and when I first put on the CD and I listened to all the tracks, first thing I thought, man, where have they been hiding this guy all these years? Because honestly, I knew nothing about you, Lou, until that Heatwave album. And but my point is,
neither did anybody else.
Yeah, but that's the point I'm making, and it's a great way to kind of introduce you to the world, because it's like, man, this guy's like, if he was around back in the '80s when all these great guitar gods were, I mean, I think he would have really been all over the place. But and there's still that opportunity. But my point is, that's how good this stuff is. That when you hear it, it's like, wow, where's this guy been hiding all this time? But I'm glad people are finally getting to see what you're all about.
Well, like I said, I appreciate you having me on, and I'm glad that it sounds to you like I want it to sound.
That's great. And before we wrap this up, I just got a few more questions. Now, next question, you had mentioned AC/DC earlier, and oddly enough, 2019 marks the 40th anniversary of their landmark album, Highway to Hell, which of course was the very last thing they did with Bon Scott. I was curious, when you think of AC/DC and that album, what does that album kind of mean to you?
Well, that album was right around, when I first started playing guitar.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know if it was the first. I think I probably heard Powerades before.
Oh yeah, of course.
Before.
Yeah.
But it was right around when I first really kind of started listening to AC/DC and really hearing them a lot. And it's just so so classic. I mean, of course, there was a period there when I was 18 or so, and that was just an album that would have been playing constantly
at that time.
That I still know, basically every lick, in my head.
What's always interesting to me about AC/DC is, you put on any of their albums, no matter if it's Bon Scott or Brian Johnson singing, AC/DC really sounds like AC/DC. There's no mistaking. I mean, a lot of his songs are based on a 3-chord progression, like just simple kind of playing. A lot of the songs sound similar, but you just can never go wrong with AC/DC. And while we're talking about AC/DC, I was kind of curious, guitar-wise, do you lean more towards like Malcolm or Angus?
Well, I mean, of course, lead-wise, I have. I think there's a definite Angus influence in some of my playing, and some of the riffs, and like a song like Jack and Coke is pretty AC/DC like, and of course a lot of that arrangement and the sort of the rhythmic feel, that's Malcolm, of course, I mean, both those guys, they're just so ported to the so solid and such a unique and recognizable sound,
Yeah, it's kind of interesting what AC/DC's kind of turned into. I mean, I've been hearing talk that they've been working on this new album. Brian Johnson's back with them. It may or may not be their final album, but apparently they found some stuff they did with Malcolm before he got sick and died, and so so that's going to be great to hear, I think, and And then the next thing I want to ask you is, I was reading also in your bio, it said that it said early on in your career that you also made music like for wrestling events. Talk a little bit about that. That's kind of interesting.
Well, that was mostly, kind of regional, although at the time, I had it in my head that I was going to, get some music to ECW. And so, I did some demos of some short, things that, were kind of heavy rock sounding, high energy, different little things, one or two that were tailored to some specific guys that that were working at that time or whatever, and never sold it, but there was a few guys that maybe used a track or two that's kind of their entrances or whatever, but just one of those ideas, like I said, you throw something out there, see if anything sticks,
it's a cool idea, because back in the day when wrestling was really big, they had a lot of metal bands, and people, like you said, incorporate their music, like Motorhead and even Megadeth, I think, and Metallica.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's kind of a mixed. It's a great way to kind of combine the book too. And you get that wrestling audience kind of has like a diehard metal audience. It kind of got a lot in common. And then a lot of people go to the wrestling events, and then they hear this great music. Oh man, who's that? Who's that? Oh, I want to check that band out. So it's a great way to kind of expose people to things. And then the last thing I wanted to ask you about, which I think is kind of interesting, I also heard a couple years back you did a Christmas album. Now I was curious, were these like Christmas standards you did? Were your own original Christmas tunes or what?
No, it was like standards, and it wasn't quite as fully orchestrated as like a Trans-Siberian Orchestra thing, but it was. But like there was a few that I did like where I really like layered up some guitars, kind of like a Brian May sound, but it was all standard, Deck the Halls and We Wish You a Merry Christmas and different things like that, where I kind of tweaked them a little bit, but it was just all standard.
And for people wanting to check that out, is that out of print? Is that something they can still check out?
That one is not in print right now, although I'm probably going to put it up
around
at least digitally, and then I'm also going to reissue the Axeman Cometh, which just sold the last hard copies that I had left of that. That's still available digitally. And then my first solo album that I did was called Pile Up, and so I'm going to re-release most of Pile Up and most of the Axeman Cometh together as a re-release on CD. So I'll have some things like that coming out. But yeah, I think if you go to loudibello.com, you might be able to still get some of the Christmas tunes.
And now let me ask you, as far as the re-release of the earlier stuff, now of course the new album's just being released last week, so is a re-release kind of down the line?
Yeah, maybe next spring or something like that.
Well, that'd be a cool idea, because as people get to know the tunes on the new album and the previous stuff, by the time you re-release that special compilation you're going to be putting out of older tunes, people will be able to get a chance to really know what you did earlier on. And I was curious, as far as doing these live shows to support the new album, how many new tunes do you think you'll be adding to the set?
Well, usually I'm doing Jack and Coke, Love is Blind, Nighttime is the Right Time, Walk Through the Fire, and the ballad I Love You. Usually we're doing all of those, but a lot of the shows I do, it's a 3-set show, and so I'll have a little handful of originals here, and then I'll do Frankenstein, and I'll do usually 2 or 3 original instrumentals, so in terms of all the stuff that's on my CDs or whatever that I might do at a live show. Now, if I do like an opening set or more of like a festival set where I'm only playing 45 minutes or something, then I pretty much do pretty much all original, or you include Frankenstein in there, and a few instrumental originals, and then the vocal tunes.
And
so
then,
it makes a nice little set.
And then the last thing I want to point out is, obviously, anybody wanting to know where you're playing, they probably get all that information on your official website. But do you think there'd be like a lot of tour dates as far as like outside of the Illinois area? Do you think you'd be playing outside of your local area?
Well, early next year, I'm definitely hoping to set up maybe something on the East Coast.
Oh, okay.
Maybe something in the Southeast, or making a few connections here and there, and the big thing with me is, I have an album out, and you would expect maybe some touring, but of course there's no record company, so I'm paying for everything.
That was my next question. Yeah. Okay, so you are an independent artist. That's
yeah, and of course, except for your major bands, there's even the up and coming bands, are usually paying to be on the bill for for a lot of opening tours and things like that.
Well, I'll tell you, Lou, even here in LA where I'm from, a lot of even the established bands, I kid you not, especially if you go down and play the Hollywood Sunset Strip, like where the whiskey and all that is, they even have tribute bands that do what's called pay to play, which they pay the club owners to, and they kind of give them like 200 tickets, and you got to guarantee that you can pack the house, or you're not going to get to play there again. That's it's kind of a sad state of affairs, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and of course that pay to play has been going on for a long time, and with my situation where I probably could, and especially working with Chip, I probably could go to the East Coast and do a handful of dates, but I probably wouldn't make any money, and I would have to pay for my travel.
And so I imagine, like you said, if you are going to do some live dates, it'd have to make sense. It'd have to. You don't want to just go out there and do it for nothing. I mean, I think.
Well, we could probably, especially, working with Chip and some people, we could probably set up some nice showcase shows.
Yeah, little one-off shows. Yeah, I mean, I think, people might
even if you go and do that, with the sort of purpose of, I'm going to kind of put some money into it and see. It's still a bunch of money to put into it.
I mean, people may be surprised to learn even some of their favorite '80s bands like Warrant and LA Guns. A lot of these bands, they're just doing the weekend show thing, and then a lot of them, even to support to be able to go out and tour. They have day jobs and stuff. I think a lot of people would be really surprised to find that out.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Certainly, if you're not touring, regularly.
Yeah.
So not just the weekends, but if you're not playing 4 or 5 nights a week and playing some pretty significant venues. I mean, it's pretty hard to make any money. Or at least to make very much,
Yeah. Well,
So but yeah, like I said, I'm just kind of doing my thing, and I'm hoping to kind of build on some of the exposure that I got with Heatwave, and we'll see what happens.
Well, I definitely want to when that re-release comes out next spring, I want to check that stuff out. But I'm definitely gonna because I've been enjoying the new album you put out, and I'm gonna definitely enjoy getting to know those tunes. But thanks so much, Lou, for taking time to talk to us today. I really appreciate it. And anytime you got anything you'd like to promote, feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to spread the word, if you will.
Appreciate it, Jason. Yeah, I'll keep you in the loop for sure, man.
Okay, take care, buddy. Bye-bye.
Okay, yep, thank you. Bye-bye.